Boo-doo-doo-doo. Hey everybody, I'm just going to send a tweet to say I'm live because my automatic notifications on Twitter don't work anymore. Don't know why yet. Something changed, maybe a software upgrade at Twitter. I'm being generous here. Alright, tweet is off. And now, to adjust my lighting. Oh no! There we go. I use my phone as my official lighting source. All right. Does everybody have their coffee? We should be joined in a moment by far more people because I just tweeted. So something happened in the past week, I think. It used to be that as soon as I got on Periscope, there was an automatic notice that went out to all of my Twitter users. But either they've disconnected that feature, or the setting changed on its own. I don't know the answer yet. It might be a software upgrade issue, maybe something I have to do. You're getting the notice, but not on Twitter, right? You're getting the notice only from Periscope? Yeah. So the difference is you're getting the notice on Periscope, but you're not getting the notice automatically on Twitter, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about self-deprecating humor. We saw some alleged examples of that coming from the president. The reported speech he gave at the Gridiron, whatever that is, some kind of traditional get-together. And I loved the way President Trump does self-deprecating humor, and I thought there's a lesson in this. All right, the lesson, the lesson here is that if you're going to do self-deprecating humor, generally speaking, as a professional humorist, I'm going to tell you, don't do it. Self-deprecating humor is always a bad idea. It's just always a bad idea. And the reason is, first of all, most people can't pull off a joke of any sort, so you end up just telling people why there's something wrong with you. But sometimes there's a situation where you really have to do a type of humor that people would call self-deprecating, and these presidential speeches are certainly that category. But here's the way President Trump did self-deprecating humor. He left out the part where it's self-deprecating, which is making me laugh for 2 days. So if you probably saw the news reports that one of his most reported jokes from the event, from his speech, was that he talked about President Xi of China being named President for Life. And then he said, President for Life. Maybe we ought to think about that over here. Now, of course, the joke plays to the thought that people believe he wants to be a dictator. So the joke is really about the people who think he wants to be a dictator. Now, in a sense, it's self-deprecating because he's taking the point of view of his critics. And normally when you take the point of view of your critics, the critics are insulting you. And if you take their point of view for humor purposes, you're accepting their insult of you. The one thing he chose to talk about was the possibility of him becoming emperor for life, which makes him look even more awesome. Obviously nobody wants a dictator, and I don't think anybody should take his joke seriously. But if you're going to do a self-deprecating joke, you want to do one in which you, as the topic of the joke, are emperor for life, or you lifted a car off a baby, or you saved somebody's life with a Heimlich maneuver. If your self-deprecating humor is registering with other people as self-deprecating, but at the same time you're complimenting yourself, either your strength or your something, then you've done it right. So the one exception for whether self-deprecating humor is good is if you can do it that way. If you can do it where you're still the star of your own joke, and people think, well, that was self-deprecating, even though it wasn't self-deprecating at all. Yeah. Now let's talk about trade deals. So the situation we have is that President Trump is stirring the pot with trade deals by saying he wants to slap tariffs on steel and aluminum first, and there may be other things he puts tariffs on later. Now, his reasoning is that the existing deals are unfair. They're unbalanced. Now the news is just covered with stories of trade deals that the president calls unfair and unbalanced. What is missing from all of the coverage so far? If I've taught you anything from listening to my periscopes, it is that the truth can often be deduced by looking at what seems to be intentionally left out of the coverage. All right, so we're having gigantic, I'll see if you can get this. There's a gigantic thing. Yes, thank you. So somebody already got ahead of me. I was going to ask you if you knew what was missing, but somebody came up with it right away. What's missing is, give me an example. Give me an example of how our agreements are unfair to us. Now, I believe that it is true that they are unfair to us. But why does the news not give us one example? Just one example. Is it because trade deals are very complicated and nobody can even tell if something is fair or unfair? Is it possible that nobody knows what is fair? Is that possible? Because let me give you two examples and see how you would evaluate these two different situations. In both cases, somebody says there's a deal that's unfair. Right? So somebody says there's an unfair deal. If I say to you, all right, the deal was this: you give me your wallet and I slap you in the face. How do you like that deal? I think almost everybody would say, oh, that's not really a deal. That's not even close. One person gets a wallet full of money and the other person just gets a slap in the face. Now, if somebody said that was the deal, I'm looking to change it and make it more equal, you'd say to yourself, well, yeah, duh, of course you have to change that deal, because a slap in the face and a wallet full of money are completely different. So you need to change that deal. Now let's say somebody said, well, here's the deal. We get X, Y, and Z. You get A, B, C. Now it's hard to value A, B, C, and it's hard to value X, Y, Z because they're different things. And nobody, they change values and they're hard to measure. But this is the deal we came up with. All right? It was the best we could do. Now, is that our situation? Is our situation that we just can't even tell if our trade deals are good or bad? Here's what else is missing from the conversation. How about all those companies that we're slapping tariffs on? Do they say, which one of these things do they say? All right, so we're talking about tariffs on, let's say, Mexico and Canada for steel and aluminum, other countries as well, but they would be included. Are Mexico and Canada saying, A, hey, our deals are already totally fair. Let me show you how. Look, you can see right here, public. These deals are already fair. Are they saying that? Or are they saying, if you do this, we will reciprocate. Your economy will go down. You'll be sorry in the long run. Which of those two things are you hearing? Are you hearing even the other, I want to swear? Can I have the pass? Give me a free pass? Is anybody here willing to give me a hall pass for cursing just this once? Cover the ears of the children. Take a simultaneous sip and get ready for it. All right. Some people are saying no. I'm going to honor the people who are saying no in this case. Why isn't anybody giving us a frickin' reason? Where are our reasons? Where's the reporting? Where is CNB saying, where is MSNBC saying, why are we trying to change these tariff agreements when they're already totally fair? Look here. Here's the agreement. Here's some bullet points from the agreement. Here's what we get. Here's what they get. How's that not fair? So, having not seen anything like that, I have to make one of two assumptions, maybe three. One is that there's nobody in the news industry who wants to look into a trade agreement, so just nobody's doing it. It's just no fun. It's hard. Maybe it's just hard. Yeah, maybe there's just no way to know. So if the situation is that these agreements are already fair, or that they're complicated and nobody can tell if they're fair or unfair, why aren't we seeing that in the press? Where are those reports? And if the deals are unfair, and by the way, I'm suspecting that the deals are unfair. I wouldn't know. I've never seen any details on any of these deals. But I suspect they're unfair because nobody's pushing back on his point. Can you imagine any situation in which the president would make such a bold claim and the fact checkers are silent? Where are the fact checkers saying, no, the president is wrong. These agreements are already awesome. They're very fair. Where's my fact checking? Frickin' fact checkers. Did you take this week off, fact checkers? Now, I'm not saying that the deals are fair or unfair because I haven't seen any reporting on it. But the fact that the media lets we citizens out here hanging while telling us that the end of the world is coming with these stupid potential tariffs or actual tariffs, the fact that the media is letting us just sit out here and twist without the basic, simplest fact that we should know about this story. Are they fair? And if they're not, give us a detail. Maybe we don't understand all of it, but just say they're unfair because of these three things. I don't even need to understand the three things. They could be three things that you need to be a trade negotiator to even understand. But can you put them on a list? Can you give me three reasons why these are not fair? And if they are fair, could you tell me? Can you have some experts tell me that the trade wars are totally fair? Or that the trade agreements are totally fair? Now, here's the mind-boggling part of this. Yes, I am in economics. I do have a degree in economics. I have an MBA from a top business school, and I have many years in business in two major corporations. But would I be qualified to judge a trade agreement? Probably not, because it seems like it's a special category. You'd probably need an expert to do that. All right, now here's what's interesting. The lack of reporting about the trade deals, in other words, the fact that no one is fact-checking the president and saying he's wrong, and they would, if there's anything you know is true, is that this president will get fact-checked. And there seems to be silence on it, or at least no headlines about it. Maybe there is some fact-checking, it's just never a headline for some reason. Given that, I think the smart money says that these deals are, in fact, unfair to the United States. Now, what situation have you ever seen in your life in which you're not allowed to ask for a fair deal? Have you ever seen a situation in which you're not allowed to ask for a fair deal? The fact that the president is the only person who's had the gigantic balls to just say, look, there's only one way this goes. It's a fair deal, or I'm going to make all kinds of trouble. Right? And he's saying, yes, I know this could be very, bad for our industries. I know that we could lose some jobs in other ways. I know it could raise costs on American citizens. But here's the bottom line. Trade has to be fair. In the long run, trade has to be fair. There's no exception to that. There's no. In what world do you enter a negotiation and you say, all right, I'll give you. Let me give you an example, because analogies are so persuasive. So I'm not trying to persuade you with this analogy. I'm using it to explain a point. You go into Starbucks and ask for a cup of coffee, and Starbucks says, okay, your cup of coffee will cost you $40 million. Do you just say, well, okay, and then pay the $40 million, or leave without your coffee? Probably not. Probably you'd push for fairness, something like closer to a few bucks for a cup of coffee. You'd probably negotiate, and if they did not come down from $40 million for a cup of coffee, you would probably leave, right? And nobody would think that you'd done the wrong thing. No, but the situation we're seeing is that you come in for a cup of coffee, and Starbucks says that's $40 million for your one cup of coffee. And you say, well, no way I'm going to pay $40 million for a cup of coffee. And so you start to walk out. And then imagine Starbucks saying, oh, you're walking out? Well, not only is it $40 million for a cup of coffee, but I'm going to shoot your dog. In what world does anything like that happen? Now, I realize it's a ridiculous example, but the point is, if it is objectively true, and it seems to be true, because nobody is pushing back on the president's claim of fact that the agreements are bad for us, if that's true, in what world do we not have every right to push back as hard as we want? As hard as we want. If they're not going to give us a deal that looks fair, if such a thing exists, why do we need to play nice? The world is a better place when fair deals are the norm, not when they're the exception. Yeah. So somebody said, what is unfair with current deals? Yeah, that was the question that we started with, so you may be joining us late. All right, so somebody noted that my tweet about this Periscope did not have an address on it, and that's because I tweeted it before I got on Periscope, and I didn't know what my address would be, and I was in a hurry. So I have to figure out how to fix my Twitter notification process, but I'll work on that. How did this happen? If you're asking how did it happen that we have bad trade deals, the answer is that it was done intentionally. So my understanding, and I think I've been fact-checked on this, is that my understanding is that we intentionally favored other countries that were, economically less, let's say, less blessed than we are, because we needed strong customers, we wanted, strong neighbors, so that we were, in fact, intentionally giving them a better deal than you might normally see in a deal. But since those countries are stronger now, it's time to reassess that stuff and equalize the deals. Now, I haven't seen the president explain it that way, but if he did, it would be very persuasive, because you need to see the arc of it. If Americans generally understood that our current agreements were intentionally made to favor the other side, I think people would feel completely different about changing it back to something fair. He has explained it in campaigns. Did he explain it the way I explained it, that we intentionally gave them better deals because we were building up the economic stability of other countries who are our customers? Well, that could be certainly emphasized. Now, there's also that question about trade deficits. And somehow trade deals and trade deficits have got conflated, and they seem to be unfairly conflated. So in other words, the fact that we're running trade deficits is not necessarily an indication of bad trade deals. It could just be somebody's making something we want to buy and we're not making enough stuff other people want to buy. So having a trade deficit doesn't mean the same thing as you have trade deals, bad trade deals. Those are different topics. I topped down at 1,000 again. Yeah, but not really. Yeah, so there's something wrong with the counter on this. 810 billion a year isn't proof enough. No, it isn't. It is not. Yeah, the size of the trade deficit does not tell you that the trade deals are bad. It is far more likely telling you that they're making stuff that we want to buy and we're not making enough stuff that other people want to buy. It could be that's all it is. That's what causes a trade deficit. Now, on top of that, there can be funny business and government subsidies and dumping and all those things. So those things can certainly contribute to the 800 billion. But you can look at those things individually. You can tell they're dumping or not. You can tell they're cheating or not. And those things could, in fact, be part of why the deficit number is the number it is. But you can't just look at the deficit and say, big deficit, therefore trade deal is bad. That logic doesn't fit, because there are other variables in the trade deficit. Roadblocks to American exports, but few for imports. What would be those roadblocks, for example? Yeah, see how it might be that just this whole trade business is so complicated that the generic media, the non-economics media, just doesn't know how to cover it. Maybe they just don't understand it. See how long it takes you to find somebody on CNN who talks about any trade deal with knowledge about why it is good or bad. Money manipulation, dumping, yeah. See, it seems to me that the dumping is not a trade deal problem, is it? Dumping is not a question of a trade deal being violated, I don't think, unless the trade deal says don't dump, and it might. But look what a basic question that is that I can't answer. All right? Do the trade deals specifically say no dumping, and can we even define what it means to dump? It's sort of one of those things, we know it when we see it, but is there actually a definition of it? I don't know. And can you ever prove it? It's hard to know if something is subsidized, isn't it? Because you'd have to have the finances of the other side to know if they're subsidizing. Dumping is taking advantage. See, it seems to me that dumping is either not the subject of the trade agreements, or if the trade agreements do specifically say there shall be no dumping, then the issue is enforcing the deal we have. It's not a question of needing a new deal. So I don't really understand how all the parts fit together, because when we talk about, look how confusing this is for the public who does not have an economics degree, and even if you do, it doesn't seem to help. When people say when anybody, let's say the president, says the trade deals are bad, is that the same thing as saying that dumping happens? Because it seems to me that the dumping is not something that was in the deal. Nobody Nobody made a trade deal that says, okay, your side can dump, our side can't. That's not a deal. So when you say there's dumping, to me that seems like a separate problem. At the most, it's a question of enforcing existing agreements about not dumping if we have those. I don't even know if that's in the agreements. And then the question of the trade deficits, we imagine that that's the same thing as saying that the deals are unfair, but it isn't. It could be. It could be a variable, but nobody is breaking that out for us. Nobody has said to us, well, it looks like 10% of our trade deficit is caused by bad trade deals, or 80% is caused by bad trade deals. I have no idea. Here's another thing you'll never see, because it's hard to measure. Let's say that Americans started paying more for tin cans and cars because of a trade war. But it had the net effect of saving jobs in one industry and did not lose as many jobs in the other industry. The benefit of saving jobs is often a lot better than somebody paid a few pennies extra for products. So these things are really hard to compare. Tin cans is a bad idea. is a bad example, I know. Especially since it's tin. If people want minimum wage, they need tariffs. What? Yeah, you remember TPP, when the only person saying, or the only notable person saying TPP was a bad deal was Trump. And then he cancels TPP, and where is all the reporting? Where are the enemies of the president saying, well, if we had TPP, this would be better, and this would be better, and this would be better? Would anything be better? Did the world fall apart because TPP got canceled? No. Is the world falling apart because of Brexit? No. Is the world falling apart because President Trump got elected? No. Mostly, the things we think of are the biggest problems in the world are they tend to be overblown. All right, for those of you who waited this long, I'm going to change topics and give you a better controversial one. I've been thinking about the arguments for climate change, from the alarmist point of view, and the arguments about gun control. And I feel like there's a weird overlap here that is not obvious. And let me tell you what that is. The best arguments I've heard from the climate science alarmists who say we should spend a lot of money to take care of climate change right away, they say, yes, it might be true that there's always some doubt about the science. There's clearly some uncertainty and a range of uncertainty about the projection models. But the argument goes that because the risk of ruining the climate is so catastrophic, it's so big that you have to treat it like you have to act as if the odds are 100% it's a problem, because you don't want to take a 1% chance of destroying the climate. It's better to spend $1 trillion to make sure you don't have that 1% risk, or whatever the risk is. If we can't calculate it, it doesn't matter, because the risk is so bad that you would treat it like it's a deadly immediate risk. Now, here's the problem with that argument. It only makes sense if you only have one problem. If you have other problems that could also completely end you, well, you have to deal with them too. And if you have a dozen things that could all cost trillions of dollars if you wanted to take the risk down to zero, then the issue of, Pascal's wager doesn't make sense, because you have limited resources. If you had unlimited money, you would spend as much as it took to take any catastrophic risk down to zero. But if you don't have unlimited money, you have to do, you have to guess which one is the bigger risk and put your money in that one. Now, let's talk about guns. The argument from gun proponents, people who are pro-Second Amendment, the best argument is not that it's in the Constitution. That's simply something that's true. It's true that it's in the Constitution. But that's not a good argument for guns, because we can change the Constitution. We can redefine it. We've got a Supreme Court if we need it. And we've seen that states can put all kinds of restrictions on things, and it passes constitutional muster. So the best argument that I've heard for gun ownership and for the Second Amendment is that it protects citizens against their own government. It protects citizens against their own government. Now, the people who say that's ridiculous would say, are you kidding me? You know, if the military of the United States ever turned against its citizens, the citizens would be so outgunned, it wouldn't matter how many bullets they had. It wouldn't matter how many guns they had. To which I say, wrong. If the military of the United States turned against the citizens would not face off against the military. They would go wherever the military isn't. They would find the families of the people who are on the coup side, and they would take them hostage. Or they would go wherever there's government families, wherever there's anybody associated with the coup. They would just go after their families, and it would happen instantly. So, in my opinion, it is valid to say that there is some protection of the republic, that the United States has a little bit, we don't know how much, but a little bit extra protection against a tyrant taking over and turning the military against us because of gun ownership and because of massive gun ownership. Now, here's where climate change argument and gun control argument bump into each other. If you believe that the Pascal's wager idea is valid, in other words, if you're a climate alarmist, do you know where I'm going at? Are you ahead of me yet? How can you be a climate alarmist and also be anti-gun? Do you get that yet? It's Pascal's wager both ways. Pascal's wager says if there's a very small chance of something happening, but that thing would be catastrophic, you have to treat it like it's real. That's what the climate alarmists say. They say there's a very small chance maybe, or even if you think there's only a small chance, maybe as an alarmist I think there's a big chance and a big risk. But even if you think there's a small chance, and even if you don't believe the climate models are exactly accurate, the fact that there's some chance of destroying the whole climate means you should put trillions of dollars into it, and you should treat it like it's like 100% risk. Now let's take that same argument over to guns. What would be the risk if an actual Hitler dictator took over the republic? Well, the second thing they do is take over other countries. So we're talking about a global catastrophe on the scale of World War II or bigger. I mean, an immense, gigantic, huge, almost unimaginable catastrophe that I think would certainly equal whatever the climate alarmists are talking about. Given the fact that no matter how bad the climate is, we'll probably find a way to survive it anyway. So it seems to me that it is logically inconsistent to say that small risk of climate change can be ignored at the same time that you're ignoring the risk of the republic going under and the benefits of guns to prevent that. And by the way, the inconsistency works both ways, right? If you're a pro-gun person, you should all be, and if your reason for being pro-gun is primarily to protect the republic against that fairly small chance that there could be a dictator taking over, I would say you should also for exactly the same logic, think that we should spend an immense amount on climate change. But I'll bet you don't. I'll bet you don't think that. You know why? Because your argument is not based on reason. Right? Let me say that again with some context. My view of the world is that people make up their minds first for irrational reasons, emotional reasons, bias, everything else, and then they rationalize it after the fact. I think you're seeing that with both climate change and with the gun issue. While I believe it is logical, and I am on this side, it is logical that guns, gun ownership allows you to get rid of mitigate some of the risk of the republic being taken over by a dictator. If you think that's a catastrophic risk, you should be in favor of gun ownership. And I'm talking the good guns, the guns that can protect you from the public. The cost of gun ownership we see and we understand and we know, and it's terrible. The mass shootings, etc. Some of them, I'm pro-gun, but it does stand to reason that some amount of draconian gun control would reduce the number of mass shooters and nuts and murderers. I believe it would, depending on what policies you tried. I'm sure you could get the deaths down, but the cost of that would be a greater risk to the republic. We don't know how much greater risk, but it's a risk of something catastrophic. So, is there anybody here who uses the same logic on both topics? Who says we have to have guns to get rid of that small risk of the republic being taken over by a dictator, and we have to deal with climate as if it's real, as if the risk is real and catastrophic, for the same reason. There's some small risk that it might be. Is there anybody who takes both sides? Somebody says, I do. Oh, all right. So if you do, then I would say that your logic is at least consistent. Your comparison is flawed. Well, I think people are saying the comparison is flawed because you have different estimates of the risks. So I think that the gun owners would say the risk of the government taking over is fairly high, whereas the critics would say, well, what are the odds of that? That's really low. Likewise with climate change, the alarmists would say the risk is high, but the haters would say, well, I don't think so. There's some risk, but it's probably pretty low. So in both cases, the thing that everybody agrees on both sides, climate science and guns, is that you can't say there's no risk. You really can't say there's no risk. You can say you don't believe it. You can say you think it's overblown. You can say people are lying to you about the details. There's tons of stuff you can say, but you can't honestly say from our level of knowledge that there's no risk of climate warming. All right, you can be sure you're right, but you can't say there's no risk. Nobody really knows that. And likewise with the chances of the country being overthrown by a dictator, you can't say there's no risk. So Pascal's wager applies both ways. What is a logical reason for what? So when people say, somebody here says, climate science is a fraud, I think what you mean is that to the best of your rational thinking, you are quite sure that climate science is not a problem. I think that's what you're saying when you say climate science is a fraud. You're not saying, or at least you shouldn't say, I know for sure, 100%, no doubt about it, that the majority of scientists are wrong. if you're saying that, I'm not sure you're a serious player, because you can't know it's zero. You just can't know that. In the same way that the most vociferous and certain climate alarmist can't know 100% that they're right. They can be so sure that what they're doing feels ethical to them, but they can't know. Nothing's 100%. Gun ownership is proven, climate science is fake. Nope. No, we have not proven that gun ownership in the United States will prevent a dictator from taking over. That is not proven. That is pure speculation. I agree with it, by the way. It is my opinion that massive gun ownership keeps the United States safer from a dictator, but it's an opinion. Can we now have a better defense than Pascal's law? You mean a better defense for gun ownership? The best argument for gun ownership is selfishness, except for Pascal's wager. So I do agree with the argument that says gun ownership keeps us safer from our own government. I don't know how much safer. Might be just a little bit, but that might still be worth it. So the better argument for gun ownership is one I've made before, which is the selfish argument. The selfish argument goes like this. Everybody has a different risk profile. If you happen to be, let's say, an NRA shooting instructor who has gun locks, lives in a rural community, and may have to even defend your own property because it would take a while for police to get there. Maybe you have something valuable on your property that could be stolen, so you're a little bit of a target. If anything like that exists, it is perfectly reasonable to think that for that person, and just that person that we're talking about right now, their risk might be lower by owning a gun. The trouble is that other people's risks are undoubtedly higher because of guns exist. So the selfish argument for gun ownership is that the people who favor gun ownership have looked at their own personal risk, the risk of their own family, and said, in my specific case, a gun makes me safer, and so I have a right to vote for that. I can vote for whatever makes me safer. Our system allows me to do that. That's the other argument. It is not logical, fair, or even ethical, really, to argue that everybody else is better off with guns. It is unambiguously true that some people are worse off with gun freedom the way we have it now, and some people are unambiguously better off the way it is. So if you're arguing for your own self-interest and the well-being of your family over the benefit of other people's family, at least you're being logical, and at least you're being honest about it. I would call that a solid argument. Our system does allow you to be selfish. In fact, capitalism is based on selfishness. Democracy, the republic, it's all based on selfishness, or else it doesn't operate right. Some people are worse off because knives exist. True, irrelevant, but true. Same with cars. Yes, it is true that some people are less safe because cars exist. Those people would be, for example, alcoholics. An alcoholic is less safe because there is such a thing as cars. And their victims are less safe as well. But we don't make cars illegal because most people have a self-interest which is very pro-car. All right, I think I've yammered on enough. So let's have one final sip of coffee. And let me sip and ask you, was this Periscope interesting? How was this one? Let's drink to your answers. Oh, good. You liked them. Thank you. Somebody's asking about chemtrails. I will tell you everything you need to know about chemtrails. There isn't the slightest chance that any of the chemtrail stuff is true. That's the whole argument. There's nothing else I want to say about chemtrails. There isn't the slightest chance that any of that is true. And move on to worry about something else, please. Plenty of things in this world to worry about. Chemtrails, not even close to being true. And let me put this in perspective. When I say that's not even close to being something that's true or something to worry about, I'm the guy who just finally decided that there's something strange with the Seth Rich case. It took me a long time to come around to that, okay? Because I start with complete skepticism, and I have to be dragged into something like that. So, and by the way, just to summarize my Seth Rich position, the things I believe for sure is that he was the source of the WikiLeaks information. That part I feel is solid. And that the murder was suspicious in lots of different ways. And there's clearly stuff that we don't know about what's going on. So those things seem certain. As soon as you go beyond that to, there was an FBI gun that was stolen nearby, that gets just speculative and sounds more like coincidence than anything else. And if you imagine that Hillary was sitting in a room with a list and saying, here's my kill list. I just added Seth Rich to the kill list. To that I say, well, anything's possible, but I doubt it. If Seth Rich was killed because of the data that he got off the DNC, my guess is that Hillary did not personally order the hit, but she wouldn't need to. There are enough people on that side who would understand the self-interest that they all shared. So you don't have to give the order. There may be people who just say, hey, I'm doing you a favor. I'll take this on myself. All right, that's enough for now, and I will be out of here. Bye till next time.